It was a British Grand Prix to forget for Sebastian Vettel, not just because of this incident with Max Verstappen, as we'll come to shortly, just all kinds of things going wrong for him. And we are going to obviously start with the crash, and I've got Ed Straw and Scott Mitchell here to talk about Vettel's racecraft, his inability to handle pressure perhaps, and just generally what's going wrong on his side of the Ferrari garage. Scott, we have to talk about this. A spectacular image, not great for Max Verstappen. It obviously ruined his race. It ruined Vettel's race as well. But is the bigger concern here the fact that it's just the latest in a growing line of Vettel errors? I mean, there's no question, despite his slightly tepid defence on the radio very briefly, no question this was Vettel's fault and another high-profile error.
I think it's the worst of the high-profile errors as well. I just think if you just look at when you look at the photo, you see, like, it's it's quite astonishing to see a car like that out of control. Least of all when it's being driven by a four-time world champion. And I've been one of the, I would like to think anyway, one of the most defensive about Vettel and his ability to race and his conduct on track. I always find it difficult to balance that desire to see a driver on the edge and being willing to fight and then immediately hang them out to dry when they've made a mistake in battle. But the problem is that we keep seeing it and seeing it and seeing it. And the reason that I feel so strongly about this error is Seb held his hands up after a bit of radio moaning. Ooh, what was Verstappen doing? He did say it was his misjudgment. He said he was trying to sneak back through. But my question is where? Like, it wasn't like Max, I think, left at most half a car length on the inside, but he never really deviated his line. As soon as he ran wide out of Stowe, he knew Max is a good racing driver. So there was never really a gap there. I don't see where he was trying to sneak through. And then to then misjudge either where Verstappen would brake on the inside or how much braking performance that he would lose himself by being in the dirty air of the Red Bull, how much grip he would have, whatever it was, he just got it colossally wrong. And it's a sort of rookie, amateurish error, really. It's the sort of thing you maybe expect. If I saw Albon or Norris or Russell doing that in combat, you'd sort of go, well, that's a bit rubbish, but you won't make that mistake again. And Vettel's been in F1 for quite a bit longer now, so to make that mistake just in the context of everything, I think it was, continuation of this flaw in battle and the worst representation of it yet.
Had a bit in common with the Spa 2010 thing, remember, with when he went into the back of Jenson Button, we lost control into the chicane, and Martin Whitmarsh, the McLaren team boss at the time, coined the name Crash Kid. It's like that, isn't it? It's just a terrible, inexperienced error.
But what it isn't similar to is the Ricciardo Verstappen shunt at Baku last year. The two key differences there are the fact that Verstappen had been sketchy in that fight already. He was lending a helping hand to that battle becoming out of control and moving down the straight, and Ricciardo trying to see if there was a gap going to open up, trying to sell in with dummy. So Verstappen had a role to play in that, and Ricciardo was trying to sell the dummy, dive inside, and then realised too late. Whereas in this instance, Verstappen's completely innocent, and Vettel's got nowhere to go. So I saw people trying to make that comparison. I think that was more of a racing incident, maybe 60-40 on Ricciardo's side. This is 100% Vettel to blame.
Yeah, I mean, the door was shut and he just ran into it anyway. Now, Ed, as I mentioned in the intro, this was already a bad weekend for Vettel before he did what we'll call the rookie error. And it's quite concerning, actually. You've compared it to an accident from 2010. We're talking nearly a decade ago. He's got a lot of races under his belt, world championships won since then. But other things are going wrong for Vettel as well at the moment. I mean, he looked all at sea throughout the weekend, really, compared to Charles Leclerc, didn't he?
Yeah, and these things are probably all connected, but what we have seen is Leclerc over the past 3 race weekends, he's out-qualified Vettel, he's been getting the best out of the car. Vettel was struggling massively. The Ferrari does not have the front-end load it needs to have. It needs more front-end downforce, and that's making the car quite understeery. That's its balance. I spent a lot of time at the weekend watching trackside, myself and Gary Anderson, particularly at Brooklands, which is a nice long corner to see that, and you could see that understeer tendency. Leclerc was able to hustle the car and get a bit more of a time on it. He wasn't being leery or aggressive, but Vettel was just sort of sitting inside the understeer. It's like, right, it's understeering, right, through. Rather than trying to just make something come of it, and that's why we saw Vettel ended up being this massive deficit to Leclerc in qualifying of 6 tenths. There was no massive mistake on his qualifying lap. He was just losing time because he wasn't able to deal with this understeery car, and that's what a driver's job is, to get the best out of the car. Everyone's got their own default driving style and what they like, and Vettel, when the car's as he wants it, is absolutely fantastic and can be an incredible, absolutely sensational driver. But he doesn't seem able to adapt to this, and this is the tendency of that Ferrari. They're not going to suddenly pile on a massive amount of front end downforce in 2 weeks' time in Germany and transform it. So he needs to get the most out of it. Things like this are happening, which is not happening in isolation. And this is what we see, that this is Vettel under pressure and making mistakes. And we've seen this over the past 12 months. More errors that can be listed. Bahrain spin, Canada he went off before rejoining. Ricciardo clash in Austin, Monza with Hamilton, so many, Suzuka with Verstappen, so many things. Germany going off while leading, not in battle. But Leclerc is now starting to take control of that team in terms of performance. That's 3 races he's been the superior driver. And Vettel doesn't like that, as we saw in 2014 with Ricciardo. Vettel sees this as his team. He wants a nice cosy relationship with his teammate as he has with Raikkonen. He hasn't got that with Leclerc. So this is snowballing. He can't get the best out of the car. He's making mistakes. It's just a real shame, because we're seeing a driver who can be great looking pretty second rate, unfortunately.
Scott, as Ed mentions there, this is part of a long-running problem now for Vettel, and it appears that the insertion of Leclerc into the Ferrari environment has perhaps upset the atmosphere perhaps that Vettel felt he was cultivating in the team when he had Raikkonen as a subservient number 2. So could this potentially mean something for Vettel's longer-term future at Ferrari?
I think it would be difficult to see how this doesn't affect how he views his options going forward, because he does have a contract at the end of 2020. It's not like he needs to decide, or Ferrari needs to decide what to do for next season. So he does have the power in that sense that he can do what he wants. But when Ferrari's already signalled that Leclerc's the future by putting him in the car, they don't have to turn around and just say, well, hey, Seb, we don't need you anymore. This guy, he's going to do the business. You put a kid that young, I should call him a kid, obviously he's a young adult with far greater maturity than I had at that age, let alone ability. But when you put your faith in that, then to a greater or lesser extent, it says, Seb, we know your days are numbered. He is not de facto top dog. He is not the undisputed number 1 inside that team. And the run that Leclerc's on at the moment is only going to shift the momentum more and more and more to the other side of the garage. And if Vettel can't be relied upon to do what the 4-time world champion in the team is employed to do, why should Ferrari back that medium term? And if Vettel doesn't feel that he's got the environment in Ferrari to turn this around, why does he stick at Ferrari long term? I'm not saying it's a guarantee by any means that he walks away at the end of this year or retires from F1 at the end of 2020 or anything like that, but how can this not sow the seeds of doubt?
We should say this, what we're seeing is exactly the reason why they had to make the change, Ferrari, and get Leclerc in. Because if you're Red Bull and you've got this guy, you can have a number 2 driver because you know Verstappen's getting the most out of it. Same at Mercedes. There were question marks over Vettel at Ferrari. Had he been absolutely brilliant, not making mistakes, they might have thought, actually, you can keep Kimi Raikkonen because that works. But they needed to test him, and he's currently not passing that test, which is a shame because, as I've said, he can be a great driver. He's a good guy. You know, he's not done that deliberately, as some people have suggested, some acts of malevolence. It's just an error. But there's too many of them, and Leclerc is now exposing that, and that's why I think Ferrari, as Scott said, will be looking at it saying, well, I'm not sure this is sustainable, and Vettel will be thinking, well, he either thinks, he's got 3 choices. He sticks it out, tries to get back on top of Leclerc and change this path. He walks away from Formula One, which he says he's not going to do. He's still not that old. He's got plenty of life in him. Or he tries to force an opportunity elsewhere and have a new challenge where he is the undisputed number 1 in a team. He did that when he moved from Red Bull to Ferrari. So, yeah, he needs to get it under control. He just has to, because the current trajectory is not good for anyone, and it will lead to Leclerc as a number 1 driver. Vettel's not going to be his support man, is he? And yeah, this cannot go on.